Jagged Alliance 3 is a rare gem in the world of tactical shooters in that it has a significant offering outside of the core turn-based gameplay.
Excellent! I've been looking for some fun!
The maps are designed both to be navigated and dominated during the combat segments, but also to be explored and absorbed as your fighting force changes its role to that of ambassadors as you interact with an absolute wealth of eccentric NPCs and progress the overall story on both a micro and a macro level. The setting is a vicious civil war in a fictional African state with everything from blood diamonds and slavery to nerve gas and genocide being featured, and so naturally the subject matter is no joke, but by presenting it through the lens of a satirical pre-millennium action movie, which is doubled down by an absolute tidal wave of parodies, some less subtle than others, somehow they actually made it work. Now this is a polarizing game, it has to be said, and not for one, but actually for two reasons. The first is that the developers chose to amp up the comedy angle found in earlier games.
Hey! Has anyone ever told you that you look like the KFC guy?
Which really sets it apart from its competitors, most notably the iconic XCOM. From passing comments between your chosen mercenaries,
"They'll never see me," which is kind of a shame, frankly,
to the wacky characters that you interact with as you progress.
It sounds to me like these people need to reinvigorate their auras with a good colon cleanse.
It swings from tongue-in-cheek through to downright preposterous.
If I could trick him into giving it to me, maybe I can sell it to you. I can do a good impression of her, so all I need to do is look like her. I am very disappointed in you. Give it to me at once.
The constant banter from the team does add charm.
I thought you liked hip-hop, rap and all that.
I do. That don't mean I can't like classical.
And as you push further into the map, the number of original characters who lay out their hopes and ambitions and force you to make on-the-spot decisions that will have cascading effects on the story is almost overwhelming. And as you progress, you'll no doubt find that the comedy isn't so much a problem as it is a missed opportunity, because I suspect that the developers didn't conceive that the game would actually end up being as good as it is.
Why you gotta give me the third degree?
And it is a very impressive game, all things told. Had it been more serious and some of the more quirky mercenaries been swapped out for more believable characters,
it's more fun when you have to try to be quiet.
They might have had something pretty genre-defining on their hands, but as it stands, it will probably remain a semi-niche product simply because the silly humour isn't really for everyone.
But there are worse things than being a coward. Being dead is one of them.
The second is that the game is hard, with serious challenges that are layered atop one another, from the ground level combat
I'm down.
to the larger scale battle tactics to the general politics, all of which have the potential to bring your progress to a crashing halt if you mess it up. And it's deceiving because you might not see it coming for a game that leans into its comedy roots. There are a number of mechanics that you need to get to grips with fast, or else you'll burn through your early game resources too quickly and need to start the entire game again, especially if you brave the higher difficulties. The problem is, the game doesn't hold your hand, in my opinion, on an almost sadistic level. I think it's intended to be part of the bigger satire angle, where the whole operation is supposed to be a bit of a shit show, well at least at first anyway, until your quirky underdog mercenaries start to show their true colours and turn the situation around.
Great job! That looks super professional and everything.
The larger map is the easiest to get to grips with once you understand how it generates enemies and distributes them. It might seem like you're overwhelmed at options, but once you get into the rhythm of training militia, repairing your weapons, and holding choke points on the map, your life will start to get a little bit easier. Sort of. Around that time, you'll also start to come to terms with the staggering scale of the map, with every little square representing a full environment. You can hop into these local areas and back out into satellite view on a whim, either to engage enemies and subsequently liberate that tile, or alternatively to explore for resources or clues regarding side missions. Depending on where you are in the game world, exploration usually takes place in an area that serves as a picturesque snapshot of the larger environment, such as an empty stretch of savanna, or a peaceful forest, or maybe even a litter-ridden beach.
Damn strict.
all of which do a great job of reflecting a large country as you slowly move in and out of different types of terrain. But more often, you'll be served a good slice of immersion as the screen fades from black to reveal some kind of urban area populated with various buildings, interactive elements, and yet more characters. Those that speak to you might well look like they belong in an online dating sim for people with a tiny hand fetish, but the sheer volume of characters matched to the quality of the designs, the fairly solid voice acting,
I'm gonna be forever grateful and so on. See you in Dreamville, ragazzi.
and original stories will shelve that line of thinking pretty quickly. Getting to grips with the map view, navigating the politics of each area, and keeping the locals on side is definitely the easy half. The combat itself can be absolutely savage. The reason for this is the game promotes the idea, especially at first, that both the untrained local guerrillas and your quirky low-feet mercenaries are basically not very good at fighting. Your team starts with ludicrously inappropriate weaponry for war, such as pistols and, well, not much else. More capable mercenaries can be accessed in time, and, of course, your arsenal of captured weapons will grow. You also gather various materials on your journey, and along with a decent mechanic, this will allow you to upgrade them beyond what the enemy possesses, all of which ultimately gives you an edge. But all of these things require you to have built up your finances, which you can only earn through hard grafting. And I think this is the hurdle over which only the most patient and dedicated players will climb. And I also think that this is a shame, because while relentless punishment is the gold standard for hardcore gamers, it also turns away a lot of average players, which can impact sales and potential sequels. But if you fear you fall into that category, fear not, because there are solutions to this, even though they're not obvious on the main menu screen, and I will cover that before the end. Now, Jagged Alliance may take inspiration from other games, and this includes its own prequels, I might add, but it absolutely reinvents the wheel and does a good job of it too, which is something I cannot press enough. As a whole, there just aren't any other games like it. I think they must have had some very experienced developers involved, which elevated it beyond what you might expect for its price point. When you first access any level, including those populated by enemies, you start in a free roaming mode, during which time you can attempt to sneak around the environment and take up positions in advance of the action kicking off. At this point you can make stealth kills, either at range or up close. But this is not really where the game shines, because your mercs still have a high chance of failure if they're not yet leveled up, which makes it a pretty arduous task.
Intruder!
And alerting the enemy before you're ready, or indeed having a merc left out in the open when it kicks off, just isn't worth the high chance of them getting badly hurt.
Enemies!
And aside from that one mechanic, the initial positioning might at first seem a little fiddly to leverage in your favour, but as the game progresses you'll come to understand that it is your biggest strategic advantage.
That's right, be patient, let them come to us.
As the key to success is wiping out as many enemies as you can in the first wave, and therefore tipping the balance in your favour. Enemy weapons can be as devastating as yours, and so positioning characters too close, or without adequate cover, or without somebody covering their back, will cause you as much of a headache as it does for the enemy, as you'll no doubt experience when they play your own tricks back at you.
Even a grizzly has limits. I need a medic.
You'll develop a silent respect for your opponents as you systematically become more and more tactical as you progress, not just to attack, but also to defend as well. On some of the larger maps, if you defeat all the enemies within a given area, it usually defaults back to the free roam mode, so you can then scout out and take on the next group. But there were occasions, such as this prison level, where it failed to do this, and I spent literally half an hour moving the entire team a painful few squares at a time. Thanks to the Steam forums, I discovered that this is in fact a known issue, and the general consensus was for me to use a cheat mod which allows you to briefly reveal all enemies on the screen. And so while I wouldn't usually promote using cheats on your first run, or any run to be absolutely honest, it is relieving to know that despite how new it is, decent usable mods are already available to mitigate these types of issues, and along with a simple Nexus login couldn't be much easier to install thanks to the mods option appearing right there on the main menu. Speaking of mitigating issues, it is worth taking a brief look at the aiming system, which is pretty much the core aspect of the gameplay. Assuming the enemy is visible, for any shot you can select torso, arms, groin, legs, or head, which allows you to weigh up the chance to hit versus bonuses, such as the head being the best for high damage, or if you hit them in the arms it'll throw off their next shot, and so on. The problem is you don't get an indication of how likely the shot is to hit. You only get told if they're in or out of range, and so you're expected to estimate this on the fly, taking into account things like cover, the angle, or what weapon your merc is using, and what their marksmanship skills are, and so on. At least I presume these are the elements you have to consider because it's never explained. Using additional action points allows you to zero in, but with no data as to how the hit chance is calculated, you don't even know if that helps, and so it can leave you pretty phased.
Ice has the kind of aura that inspires greatness.
The devs claimed that they did this to simulate the wild unpredictability of battle.
Are you daft? That's a complete and utter fabrication!
I presume they did it to separate it from XCOM, which famously provides the percentage hit chance and the potential damage on screen. And I think most of the community actually agrees with this, because there is in fact a single mod released by the developers themselves, which comes with a warning saying that it spoils the experience. And, of course, it does, because then the gameplay isn't balanced and it makes it way too easy. When I first started playing, I was missing pretty much every single shot, and rather than claw my own face off from frustration, I turned to the forums for some advice, and the overwhelming response was, use the mod. But don't just take my word for it. The fact is, mods are available from the main menu of the game, and on the website this is the #1 highest rated and most endorsed mod. And so the numbers don't really lie, that's what a lot of fans want. So I downloaded it and switched it on for a few levels, if only to get an understanding of what kind of numbers I was dealing with, and I couldn't believe how low the hit chance was in some cases, specifically because you start with these stupid close range pistols, which only really work if you're on top of the enemy. And so I have absolutely no regrets. I'm so glad I turned it on. Now after I got a rifle or two and started to build better mental estimations of what would and wouldn't hit, I switched it off and never used it again. They should have included this option as a tick box alongside the difficulty settings, or maybe provided it during the initial tutorial stage to help players get to grips with the mechanics. And who knows, maybe in a later patch they will, but for now I would highly recommend it if you're going in blind and want to fast track that early part of your learning curve. What's also worth noting is that the game autosaves after every single turn, so you'll never truly be at risk of losing your favourite mercenaries, because at a stretch you can reload at any time and try that round again. But that comes at a massive cost, because reloading saves is a slippery slope, and not only does it butcher the immersion, but it also spoils the satisfaction that comes after a difficult win. And in this, personally, I think they got it wrong. On the standard recommended difficulty, it's just too hard. And if you like to be strict on yourself like I do, and don't want to face anything as drastic as restarting from the beginning, or to a lesser extent losing all of your favourite mercs and be left only with the stupid irritating characters, you'll find yourself often engaging in the dubious act of reloading, followed by trying to convince yourself that you're not actually cheating your way through the game. And ultimately, that's fine, play it how you want, but my preference and indeed recommendation for those going in blind would be to start the game on easier settings and then up the difficulty manually when you feel that the challenge is tapering off, to avoid that temptation of playing God. And I know that this line of thinking might upset some of the more diehard fans, and I do empathise when they flip their lid over instances where public pressure forces game makers to reduce the difficulty settings. It really does suck. No one can deny the gratification that comes in games like Bloodborne from nailing that bastard orphan of Kos after like 57 attempts. But it needs to be a special game to warrant that much abuse, which is where games like Dark Souls and Hollow Knight corner the market. In this case though, the novelty of seeing my mercs get catastrophically annihilated again and again wore off pretty quick, and it just didn't mix so well with the otherwise happy-go-lucky spirit of the game. It didn't need to be this hard. It has enough going for it to make the game fun without some of the crazy hard difficulty spikes that blindside you every 20 minutes. With all of that in mind, I honestly can't say I remember the last time I had such a love-hate relationship with a game. As I approach the end, something that I might add is a different experience each time due to the incredible butterfly effect that drastically changes your final objectives and the main antagonists. I concluded that the enemy forces really don't scale with your capabilities. The better your weapons and mercenaries become, the more you learn to exploit the procedurally generated enemies on the satellite map, and the easier the game gets, which is kind of reverse of what most games are like.
I'm sick of this bloody country. The bugs are too big and the women are too small.
But then again, with the game being so hard in the earlier stages, this isn't so much a complaint as an observation. In the end, I found that having a couple of soldiers with well-placed machine guns, a couple of marksmen with powerful sniper rifles that almost never missed, an angry Scotsman with enough explosives to sink a ship, and a hippie doctor on hand to fix my mistakes, I finally got into the flow of things. Once you can afford it, upping the number of mercenaries you have to a small army really is the most reliable way of taking down the most difficult enemies.
Read you, 5x5.
If you are a turn-based strategy fanatic, or you've already cut your teeth on games like Phoenix Point, Miasma Chronicles, or indeed the XCOM games, I already know you'll be mesmerized by this game, which takes the core tactical combat and then expands the battle mechanics and the immersion of the world around you. And if you're yet to dabble in turn-based shooters, I don't doubt that there's potential for you to enjoy this game, but just remember that tactical shooters are not known for being forgiving, and Jagged Alliance 3 is a staple example of this trope. Nevertheless, being that its budget and cost are only that of a AA game, currently it's about £25 or $30 US, no number of frustrations can come close to damaging its well-justified and growing reputation. It is very, very impressive in both scale and execution, from the graphics to the gameplay, to the massive soundtrack. It's got like 57 songs or something. It's the pretty engaging story that does its best to emulate a twisting 90s spy thriller. These super high ratings that I'm seeing across the board I think really are justified, but I refuse to pretend that I blazed through it like some kind of tactics pro, which I swear half the internet is pretending, because it is not easy and I don't know why everyone pretends that it is. Few games shamelessly slap you around so hard while allowing you to pore over the tactics and really flex the strategic part of your brain.
See that shot? That was tight!
But almost none of them then wrap you up in a warm and genuinely charming blanket of good humour.
He made a request that the donation board could never approve of.
What, did they ask for a free sponge bath with every visit? I tried that one myself.
As well as constant little fun expositions and old-fashioned good-spiritedness the next.
Oh, how I miss the smell of home. Thanks to you, I'll be back at the dump soon enough.
A like or subscribe would help me so much if you can, so please don't hesitate to mash that button if you feel like it. Thanks for watching, take care of yourself, and hopefully see you next time.